Welcome to the Underwater Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of underwater portrait photography, cinematography, and everything in between. With me, your host, Brett Stanley. Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for joining me for episode 3. I think this means we're actually a legit podcast now, meaning that I can start to relax a little bit and just enjoy this ride. As always, your support means everything to me and to my guests as well, knowing that you're interested in their stories enough to keep tuning in. In today's episode, we have an interview with professional mermaid and underwater performer Hannah Fraser, who is also known by her stage name Hannah Mermaid. I've had the pleasure of knowing Hannah for a few years now. We've worked together quite a bit, and it was nice to just sit and chat with her for an hour and get to talk about her career. She's an inspiring person, and I know every time I shoot with her, we're going to get something beautiful, as her drive makes me push the limits of what I can do. Actually, this reminds me of one of the first times I worked with Hannah, which was down in the Bahamas. She'd asked me to come down there for a week of photo shoots with her and another model, David Langlois, whose boat we actually stayed on. We wanted to shoot some images with the reef sharks, so we headed out to a spot on the reef that David knew of, and we started setting up. It was midday, which is a good time as the sharks tend to be a little bit more docile then, and so we chummed the water to get them to come to our anchor line, which means we had a box full of fish guts tied to our dinghy that the sharks could smell, which brought them around us. I'd never shot with sharks like this before, so I was a little nervous, but David just told me to try and keep as chill as I could, as the sharks could sense fear, which, was not a great thing to hear. We rolled into the water and sunk down the anchor line to the sandy bottom, which is where we were going to shoot, and we were all on scuba gear, which Hannah and David were going to ditch as they posed for their shots. They then put their regulators back in to breathe between the photos. But as we were getting ready, the sharks had started to gather and swim around us. It was pretty cool, and I was excited by everything that I forgot my fear and I relaxed a bit. I started setting up my gear, checking everything, and doing some test shots, but my camera wasn't focusing. I had no control over it. I couldn't get the lens to focus at all, and I didn't have a manual control on my housing to change that control system. And I realized that somehow I'd flicked the autofocus button on my lens to off, meaning that it wasn't going to focus any way I tried. There was just no way to get it to work. And that I'd have to go back to the surface, open the housing, change that switch, and then come back down again. I looked up to the others and to signal that I had a problem, and I noticed that the number of sharks around us had doubled. There was way more sharks than before, which was kind of a little unnerving. I let the others know that I had to go up and I would be back soon, and I took a deep breath. I had to swim back up to the little boat that we had. The little boat with all the fish guts hanging off it. I had to swim up there by myself and haul myself back into the boat. The idea of this was a little kind of freaky for me at the time. I managed to get back up there. I got into the dinghy, I fixed my housing and I tested it. And I was about to roll back in, but then I thought I should probably check. And I stuck my head in the water to have a look, and there was more sharks there. Just reef sharks, but they were, sort of 2 meter long, and I started to kind of freak out a little bit. There was no way that I couldn't get back in the water. I had to get back down there and finish this shoot, but it was taking every fiber of my being to slide back into that water and drift down the rope. As I dropped down to the sand, I realized that these sharks weren't even paying me any attention. They were just swimming around. They were kind of interested in what was happening, but they weren't really aggressive at all. And it made me calm down because it realized that they were just like big dogs. And if I didn't give them a reason to be aggressive, they weren't really interested. They were just curious. They're intelligent animals, and they just wanted to know, A, where the fishy smell was coming from, and why we were blowing bubbles all over the place. I just relaxed, and it felt amazing to just be down there in their company with all these reef sharks, these big animals swimming around us. I got to the bottom, we did our photo shoot, and then we just went home. It was a totally amazing experience, and one that I hope that you guys can have yourselves one day, or at least learn from my experience that there is a positive kind of energy that comes from these animals, that they're not looking to to take us out. They're not looking to feed on us. They're out there just looking after their own selves. After all that, the photos just totally sucked because I didn't do very well. It was no one else's fault. Everyone did their jobs really well, but I just didn't take very good photos that day. And that happens. It's just something that you can't control sometimes. And I'm just glad that I got something awesome out of it with that experience. With all that in mind, let's dive into the interview with Hannah Fraser. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brett. So fun to be on here with you. One of my favourite photographers of all time.
Oh, you don't need to say that stuff.
It's all true. It's all true.
So the first thing I want to get out of the way is probably the main question people have is, what is a professional mermaid?
A professional mermaid for me is someone that has created a full career out of doing underwater performance art, mainly in a tail, and is getting gigs such as live performance art, and basically has the skills to be able to stay underwater, perform underwater, interact with sea life, and make a believable mermaid character.
So you've kind of got those three, or maybe more than three hats, but you kind of call yourself an underwater mermaid. Is that just because the mermaid kind of idea just encompasses a lot of what you do?
Yeah, for me, a mermaid is a servant of the sea. It's literally the word mer means ocean and the word maid means servant. So for me, it's all encompassing being a servant of the ocean and of nature. And whether I'm wearing a mermaid tail or I'm not, or I'm just underwater performing, all of that is in service to awaken people to the glory of the underwater world, that beautiful weightless feeling that you get, self-expression, female empowerment. And for me, all of those are like signposts of the siren mythology itself.
Right. So that's kind of like the mermaid is your spirit animal. Like it's kind of the
Exactly.
embodiment of everything that you kind of believe in.
Nailed it.
That's great. And so I guess the other thing leading from that is, how did you even get into that? How did you know that you wanted to be a mermaid? How did you know that you wanted to spend so much time in the water?
Yeah, well, I did not grow up near the ocean, and I was fairly landlocked as a kid. However, I was always obsessed by mermaids. They were just part of my fantasy world, I guess I created in my head. And as a very prolific young artist, I was drawing mermaids from a very young age. And when I was 9 years old, I saw the film Splash with Daryl Hannah, and I thought, oh my God, this is fate. Her name's Hannah. She's a vegetarian like me, and she's a real life mermaid. And I thought, that is what I want to do. Luckily, I had a mum who was very handy with a sewing machine. So she whipped up this plastic orange tablecloth material tail filled with pillow stuffing in the end. And I spent hours painting little gold scales all over it, and then jumped in the pool. And it was so non-functional. It did more to drown me than to help me swim. But I guess it gave me a really good crash course lesson in how to handle difficult situations underwater, because I was practically drowning. But I somehow managed to make it work for me, and I swam around in that thing for months until it disintegrated. And I spent a lot of time drawing mermaids as an artist, and it wasn't until my late 20s when I began modeling that I went for a casting for an underwater shoot. And all these other gorgeous girls could not hold their breath, did not look glamorous or composed underwater. And with these skills that I'd picked up in my young years swimming around in that tail, and through all yoga, meditation, and breath work that I'd practiced throughout my life, I had a natural ability that I didn't even realize I'd been cultivating my entire life. And so I got this great job, and from then on, it was just a complete passion for me to be photographed underwater and to have that weightless, beautiful experience inhabiting what it feels like to be a true mermaid.
Cool. So that was just all those skills that you've been practicing in the pool by yourself suddenly came to be really, really useful for you.
Yeah. And as I said, I'd also grown up going to do a lot of yoga, meditation, and breath work, as my mum, wonderful hippie woman, had taken me to these incredible ashrams in India throughout my childhood. So I'd created all of these skill sets without realizing that they were going to help me in my underwater experience later on in life.
And this was before YouTube and internet sort of kind of learning and stuff as well. So you kind of...
Brett, you're telling everyone how old we are.
Yeah, I know. We're showing our age right now, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think that not having those things made it harder for you, or did you just have to kind of figure these things out for you, like by yourself? Like, how did you learn how to sort of, outside of doing the yoga and the breath work and stuff, was there techniques that you kind of just learnt from kind of practicing yourself?
Yeah, it was all self-learned. I truly did have a natural ability. By the time I had my tail on, I'd already spent so much time enjoying underwater, just swimming around, pretending I was a mermaid. So by the time I actually needed to put those skills into practice and had a tail on, I was instantly a natural. But as far as creating a tail, it was a whole different story. These days, you can go online and just find a mermaid tail in any kind of fabric, silicone fabric, neoprene, all of these different things are available to just purchase. When I first started this, there was absolutely zero online. And I had to create my whole mermaid tail from scratch, from the monofin to putting flippers on polyethylene boards and sanding them down and putting silicone with it and hand sewing, hand painting scales onto these tails. And I remember reaching out to all these different movie houses and people who had made tails for films or photo shoots before. And I got on to Robert, who was the first creator of the splash tail for this film, Splash, with Daryl Hannah. And he was one of the only people nice enough to write back to me and tell me how he'd created that tail. Now, unfortunately, I did not have $30,000 and a huge movie production team to create multiple tails such as they had in that film, but it just was nice to know that there were other people out there that were excited enough about creating mermaid tails that were in contact, and it gave me inspiration to figure out how to do it myself. So yeah, it's been quite a process, and I now have 14 tails that I've all self-created. Each one takes about 6 months to create.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely a labor of love.
Because I've seen your tails, and it's like every scale is hand stitched on. It's not like it's a fabric that has been printed with the scales. They're actual real individual scales.
It's literally 6 months of solid work for each tail. And these days I do get help. I have people who help me come and sew the scales. And then I work in collaboration with amazing silicone fin creation people who co-create the design of the fins with me. So using these gorgeous, big, fabulous fins. Yeah, it's such a process, and each one is so unique, and each one has a different personality. There are some that I'd wear if I want to go faster, or there are some that are just like amazing on show, showcase the fish colors, and you can't go very fast, but they look fabulous. But every single one of them is fully functional underwater.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you're speaking about them having different kind of personalities and different specifications, I guess, I want to talk about that a little bit later on in terms of how you choose what kind of tail or what kind of equipment you use to do your job. But let's just finish up with how you have gotten to where you are today with the ocean activism and getting into the more commercial kind of film world as well, because I know you're doing a lot more of that these days.
Yeah, it's been a gradual process. And with the activism and ocean conservation, I've always been really active in trying to stand up for nature and the planet Earth. I remember before I was a mermaid, I dressed up like a fairy and stood out in front of old growth forests, in front of bulldozers, trying to bring attention to these issues. And within the first month of creating my first mermaid tail, I got out on a bridge that was being demolished, that was creating a major hazard for a waterway going to the ocean, and got photographed by the local paper for doing this activism. And so I immediately knew that the mermaid persona was a really great tool for bringing attention to the ocean conservation and issues that we're facing with, overfishing and pollution and all of these poor animals being annihilated by the human species. And I continued on once I'd become a professional mermaid. I then utilized the persona that I have and went to do things such as protest against the dolphin slaughter in Taiji in Japan, where we faced off the fishermen who were killing dolphins in front of our face, one of the most brutal and intense things I've ever seen.
That's intense.
I went to a number of international whaling conventions around the world and helped stage protests there. We created a large visual petition of thousands of photos of people from around the world holding images of whales and dolphins and printed them onto massive, like meters and meters of banners to take to these different conventions around the world. And I think that having a cause and having a real purpose behind what you do that is beyond your own expression really helps people to connect to what my message is, and therefore gives people a reason to share what I do. And so it has helped in my commercial world as well. And as far as that, I've done 2 movies in the last sort of 5 years, I think it was, which was Scales and A Mermaid's Tale. Really fun stuff. And it's one of my biggest passions, actually, is to create a fantasy and then bring it into the reality. That's what I gave a TED talk on, of like, how do you take this fantasy world and bring it into this reality to create change and literally get laws changed. I worked with ocean conservationist Sean Heinrichs on a number of projects where we were showcasing how animals and humans can interact peacefully. And we took a video that we created called Manta's Last Dance to the Convention for International Trade on Endangered Species, and we're able to help get the law changed by getting all of the delegates from around the world to stand up in favor of manta rays who are now protected. So there's lots of different ways that you can help, and by creating these beautiful images can then go on to actually enact change around the world.
Yeah, that's incredible. It was that kind of idea of having something that shows humans and these animals interacting in such a beautiful way just really kind of brought it back to them how important this was. And what I kind of find is that, as unreal as it is, a lot of these things need to be pushed over the top. Like the production value needs to be in there to be able to show people what these things can actually be like and how they can change their minds.
It's difficult for people to connect to these very unusual, strange animals in the ocean if they're not even someone that's ever been swimming in the ocean. So to showcase them interacting with a human with really high production value and artistry, it just really brings it home in a different way, and people can imagine themselves feeling connected to these animals, and anything you feel connected to, you love. And then when love is there, we can make changes because people will take action.
Yeah, totally. And this is something that I find in my life, because I volunteer at a local aquarium here in Los Angeles called the Aquarium of the Pacific. And I'm actually in the tank with the animals doing presentations to the audiences outside.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And it's such an interesting thing to see the kids when they're walking through these aquariums. They're not really connecting, that they're just basically looking at a big screen with animals that they don't really know anything about. But it's not until they see us divers come down and then start talking to them from inside there that their eyes light up and they're like, oh, this is real. Like, there's a guy in there. This is so crazy. And then they start listening to what you're telling them about how these animals live and how sharks are safe, because I'm feeding one with my hand right now. That it's just that kind of, you got to find a connection with them somehow.
Yeah, that's such a good point and so perfectly illustrated.
To take that a bit further, with this kind of Activision stuff and the stuff you've been doing with Sean is incredible, because you also did the tiger sharks as well with the body paint?
Yeah, so Sean and I went down to the Bahamas and we figured, hey, we've done these really amazing connected videos with manta rays and whale sharks that went viral across the world. But how do we do that in a way that is, one, safe, and two, evocative and creates a feeling of affection and love for one of the most feared predators on the entire planet? And so we were like, well, tiger sharks and sharks in general are being annihilated. We are killing 100 million sharks every year. That's 12,000 every single hour. So these guys need our help more than any other animal at this point. So I put my hand up to go down and swim with 17-foot tiger sharks in the Bahamas without any protective gear. And I was just painted up in a bikini. And I was weighted to the bottom of the ocean floor with 12 pounds of weight. And yeah, took off the mask, take out the air, hold my breath, and dancing with these incredible beings. And what I found was really amazing, because out of all the animals that I've swum with in the ocean, these were the only ones that came directly up to me for physical contact. And they weren't at all trying to eat me. I never felt in danger. I never felt like they were looking at me like I was food. They were curious, and they seemed to actually be interested in being tickled on the nose, or just like sliding past and having physical contact. And to me, that just blew my mind, because, here we are thinking they're these man-eating, hungry monsters that Jaws has taught us about, and that all they're doing is just sitting under the water waiting for us to come in and they can eat us and attack us and take our arms off. There's just so much negative media around these animals. And to me, it was one of the most joyful, amazing, connected experiences I've had with ocean animals. So it changed my mind. And then when we put that out into the world, we had like 50 million views in the first 24 hours on TV networks and online. And people just
That's
started
incredible.
writing to us saying, "Oh my God, you've totally changed my whole perspective on sharks. And I used to be scared to go in the ocean, and now I'm really interested to check it out. And I never even knew about, what was going on with the sharks, and now I want to help." So yeah, it's a really positive way to get the message across, is to use art and activism as one force to change people's minds.
Oh, totally. And I think that's a really good way to bring us into the more technical side of stuff. Because if you're doing something like this, where you're 20, 30 feet down and you're on weights and you're on air, you're on a regulator, what sort of team did you have behind you to make that happen, to make sure that you were safe? I mean, you've got an amazing breath hold to start with, which gives the safety guys a lot more time to work with you. But who was there looking out for you in terms of getting you to be safe and to be able to breathe, and also to people that were, kind of keeping an eye on the other animals that were around?
These adventures underwater, when you're swimming with, potentially deadly animals, really do take an extremely experienced team. And I went down there with Jim Abernethy, who's one of the most experienced shark divers in the world. He's been diving with these guys at Tiger Beach for 20 years. He knows every single one of those sharks by name. He can tell you about their behavior, and he is so comfortable with them. I think he likes them more than humans. So I definitely had the best team available, and we went down there. We had about 5 or 6 safety guys with us. I had 2 guys who were down there specifically just dedicated to bringing me air when I needed it. And there was one instance where I signaled for air. I have a specific hand signal, and there was a tiger shark kind of going in between us, and he just kind of waited until the tiger shark had gone past, and by then I was like, I need air. And so we had a talk afterwards, and I said to him, I don't care if there's a tiger shark between us. You are going to push that shark out of the way to bring me air, because I am holding my breath until I really cannot hold it anymore. And I need you to just respond the second I move. And he was like 100% on it. From then on, he literally did push tiger sharks out of the way to bring me air. I had such a good team. So we had about 4 people filming, and then another person filming behind the scenes filming, and then all of these shark wranglers and safety guys. So it was definitely a big production. I think we had at least 10 or 12 people down there most of the days when we were shooting.
And how far from the shore were you? Did you have to go out on the boat, or were you just out sort of shore dive?
No, it takes a couple of hours at least to drive out on a fast boat to Tiger Beach. So we were living on the boat for a full week and diving every single day. It's quite remote. So it's definitely challenging physically. Although I'm a wonderful mermaid, I do get slightly seasick. Not awful, but I'm just kind of a bit off. So the whole week I was just really average and tired until you get me in the water underneath the waves, and then I'm like 100% on fire. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the poor girl who was airbrushing me, which took over 2 hours every single day, sometimes multiple times, was trying to airbrush me on the back of a tiny cramped boat with lots of men on it, with equipment and wind blowing, and she got really seasick every day, bless her heart. So it was not an easy shoot. There was a point where I was so tired. I felt like I had ear infection. My back was out. It hurt to breathe. And I said to Sean, and this is the first time I've ever said it, I really don't think that I can go in the water today.
That's a big thing for you.
Yeah, I've never said that before. And he was like, all right, let me just help you. He's an amazing healer. So he did all of this massage body work on my back that was out of place. I did some healing on my ears, and I got in the water and all the pain just disappeared. And I was able to get through. And it was amazing because it was that one day where I had to push beyond all my reserves. Was the one time when I got the full-on contact with the tiger shark. So I was able to put my hand right on its nose and just have this moment of incredible connection.
That's incredible. And that was when you were quite emotional as well from all the hard work. Yeah.
I was definitely emotional, and I had to really push past, because you can't take that fear and weakness down when you're working with sharks, because they sense all of your energy, your frequency that you're putting out. So I had to just kind of come from, I am strong, I am the alpha, I am directing all of this. It's like this Matrix moment, you know, when they dodge the bullet and they wheel over backwards. That's what I was doing with the sharks. I was directing energy.
Yeah. And that's so funny you say that, because the first time I shot with sharks and people was with you and David down in the Bahamas. And I remember being so freaked out by that whole situation. And I think it was David was just like, you just have to be calm. If you're relaxed and calm, then so are they. And I'm like, what?
Like, how? How am I supposed to relax? It's sharks everywhere.
It's crazy. And it wasn't until I got into the water, because, you know, water's my happy place, as it is yours. And it was just that sort of thing of, oh, this is all good.
Yeah.
They're just big dogs. You know, it's totally
really
fine.
Are. I really felt like they were these big old hounds kind of moving along the bottom of the ocean, sniffing around, checking us out, and coming up to say hello. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. And so the resulting video, which I think is only a few minutes long, that was the result of a week's worth of shooting? Or was there days that you just didn't get anything?
There was one day where we didn't get any sharks, but then every other day we got footage. And there's still so much footage that hasn't been released, but we really did cherry pick, you know, and got down to 2 minutes worth of footage from 6 days. So what you see is the culmination of an insane amount of hard work to get that.
If ocean is open water, then your tanks and your swimming pools and that sort of stuff are closed water.
Yeah.
What are your experiences of doing the tank work?
I really love tank and pools because there's so much control. And so that's where you get to do a lot more of just the really artistic body work and lighting and really crazy outfits, because you've got this amazing controlled environment. And like, especially working with you, Brett, where you actually create sets underwater, like that just is one of my ultimate fantasies, to be able to do all of this incredible fantasy world, making it reality. And it's really cool because you can also start to work with the surface a lot more, whereas the ocean is always moving. You can't get a really calm surface. But one of my favorite looks in underwater photography is the reflection that you get. So if you can just come up and start to interact with that still pool surface, you get this incredible mirror imagery happening.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite looks, actually. That's one of the things that has brought home how amazing it is underwater, is just playing with that liquid mirror, that quicksilver kind of layer at the surface there.
Exactly.
In terms of the tank work, I mean, it's mostly chlorine water.
Yeah, that's the downside.
Yeah, so that's got to play havoc with your skin and your eyes and even your sinuses, because you've got water running up there every time.
Yeah, people always ask me, how do you keep your eyes open? How do you stop the water coming down your nose? And Basically, with the eyes in salt water, I never really find it to be a challenge. Salt water is natural to be on the eyes. Maybe it's a little bit of a sting for a minute or so, but it goes away. It's fine. It's not damaging your eyes. Chlorine, on the other hand, is brutal. And I can't tell you the amount of times where I just haven't even been able to drive home after a shoot for hours because my eyes are so blurry and red and irritated from the chlorine. It's really hardcore. And also, with water going up your nose, there is no way to stop water going up your nose. There's only ways to stop water going down into your lungs. So you have to get used to the feeling of your entire sinus cavity being flooded, often with burning chlorine water, while just closing off the back of your throat so it doesn't go down into your air tubes, into your lungs. So it's definitely an acquired skill. Some people struggle for years and just can't manage to do that. And others, once you tell them, take them through the techniques, which I do in my classes and workshops, they're like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. So everybody's got their own challenges with it. But there's so many different things to think about when you're underwater modeling that people get pretty freaked out at the beginning. Everyone thinks, oh, it looks really fun and really easy, but it's not.
No, and I've had that with my clients where I've had people who are like, no, I'm totally fine. And I'm like, okay, are you used to being in the water? Oh, I swim all the time. Okay. And then they go to model and suddenly they're not swimming anymore and they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And know how many people really think about what their face looks like when they're under the water.
Exactly.
Usually they're scrunched up trying to stop the water getting into every orifice that they have, but they're not thinking about how that looks on camera.
Exactly.
So from your point of view, how can people relax when they're under the water? Like, what are your processes when you go under? Do you have like a little checklist of things? I mean, it's probably muscle memory for you now, but is there a sort of a little list of things you can do to make sure you're looking the best on camera?
Absolutely. It's definitely all muscle memory now. I luckily don't have to think about it, but having now learning to teach other people, I've had to retrain my brain to understand all of the things that I do intuitively. And it's been a really interesting process. But I've had to go back and really make a checklist for the people that I'm teaching because it's not something that we normally do. So before we even get in the water, I take people through a yoga, meditation, and breath work. And that just calms the heart down, makes it beat slower, oxygenates the bloodstream so they can hold their breath longer. And so they're not panicking when they go underwater. And then I start by saying, okay, let's start at the top of the head and work down. With your eyes, you need to relax the eyes. They don't want to be big, googly fish eyes, and you also don't want to have squinty eyes. So just be really aware of what your eyes are doing because a lot of people kind of look like dead fish. You also have to emote more on underwater on camera than you think because most of the time people look very blank and a little bit dead underwater. And then with your mouth, you have to not be like puckering like a big pucker fish and also just gently smiling. So you look like you're having fun under there and not panicking. I often say, people just open your lips a little bit and you can close off the back of your throat with your tongue and you can just allow water just come in the front of your mouth. And that stops people from pursing too tightly or from having big blowfish mouth. And then with the shoulders, you need to drop them back and down because we tend to hunch the shoulders up underwater and then the arms float up. So we need to bring everything down and pretend that you actually have some gravity to work with. So you look long and extended through the back of the spine and through the shoulders and the neck. And then we don't want to have pits always like right up in your face. So generally bringing the arms down or just bringing one arm gently up. And then you don't want to have your knees all bent up underneath you, which most people tend to do. You want to like elongate the legs, point the toes, try not to bend the knees too much unless you're doing like a little side cute ball or something. There's specific poses that works. But in general, you want to really try to elongate your body. And pointed toes, it's just 100% thing that will make every photo look lovely. You have a bent ankle and all of a sudden your whole photo is ruined. And also hand position is really important to have like, those photos or the old artworks of the hand of God reaching for the hand of man where they touch the fingers. it's that kind of hand position where you just want these beautiful, flowing, gentle ballerina type hands. You don't want to be like making fists or like flipper fingers or anything like that. So
Yeah, just keeping it nice and relaxed, right? Just natural, and let the water float you a little bit.
And although you want to aim for a specific pose and communicate that with your photographer, often things will shift and change and you'll be falling over. And rather than just struggling the entire time to get that one thing that you think you have to do, sometimes you have to surrender to what the water is doing and make that the pose, this beautiful falling gently down into the water column. And then that might be the most amazing pose that ever came out of it. So there's a lot of surrender, a lot of just going with the flow, literally.
I think that's something that I try and teach my clients, is that it's being open to things not going how you plan them, but being able to react to that. So not so much being in control of the situation. It's more about reacting to what happens and being able to make the best of that situation.
Absolutely. And there's so many different things going on, like with the hair is often floating around in front of your face. So there's different techniques we can use to kind of gently brush the hair out of the face in a graceful gesture that can be part of the photo as opposed to struggling with it. You can make gentle flowing head movements back and side to side to get the hair out of your face. And then if you're wearing a dress underwater, that's another whole ball game to play with. It can be very heavy. It gets stuck all around your legs, so you don't have any use of kicking your legs. You only have your arms to work with. And just trying to, get all of the pieces in the right place at one time. People are often fiddling and moving around so much, trying to get all of these aspects ready for the camera that no shot is ever taken because they're in perpetual movement. So slowing down is one of the most important things that I always tell people. And if you think you're going slow enough, you're not. You still have to slow down some more.
The slower, the better. And I think as a photographer, that is the most common thing I'm telling someone to do, is to move slower. Because I think once you're under the water, your whole sense of time totally changes. You don't have any concept of how long you've been down there for. And with that in mind, what sort of advice do you give to photographers who are working with models underwater, say for the first time? How can they convey what they want with those models? Are there things that they need to be aware of in terms of getting models to pose in certain ways?
Yeah, another really important point is that the model always needs to look up to wherever the light is coming from. And obviously with underwater, it's rare that you have underwater lights. You're often just working with natural light, which is coming down from the top of the pool. So rather than the model lifting their head directly towards you, we don't want to see up their nose. You want to get the model to turn to the side a little bit and, do a little bit of a profile shot so they can get their face up to the light. And showing the model before they get in the water what specific poses you have in mind. So you're not trying to impart too much information to them while they're struggling and trying to think about all these different body parts. Have a really set plan of what you want to create, with, of course, the understanding that everything shifts and changes in the water as well. And just choosing one pose for each shot so that they're not trying to do a whole bunch of different things. That's very confusing. It's interesting thinking about it from the photographer's point of view instead of the models.
Oh, it totally is. And it's interesting for me because I've been doing underwater photography for so long, but very rarely do I ever become the model. And so it's not until I become the model, which I've done for a couple of self-portraits, where I've realized, holy crap, this is hard. I'm so used to having a mask on. I'm so used to being able to see. I'm so used to not having water up my nose. The times when I have become the model, it's intense.
You gain an appreciation for what they're going through, for sure.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And it makes me understand how difficult some of the things that I'm asking people to do might be. And especially the not being able to see. I think we as photographers, or even just as divers, forget that you really can't see crap under the water without a mask on.
So true. Yeah, and the photographer saying, look at me. You're like, are you that blob I can't see over in the distance? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. There's an awesome video of you that I've seen recently where I don't know where you were, but you're on a reef somewhere in a tail and you're on a regulator and the regulator's taken out of your mouth and then you swim across this reef with no mask on. And it looks like you can totally see where you are and it looks like you've totally know exactly what's going on.
What I usually do is I have a little swim around with the mask on, and just before I take it off, I take a mental snapshot in my head of where I'm going and what that looks like and the main markers that I'm trying to hit. And so when I'm doing it and it's completely blurry, I have a really strong reference point in my head. And I got to say, over the many years that I've been doing this, I really believe I've gotten some kind of extrasensory perception of blurry vision. And I can see by the way things kind of shift and move underwater. I can tell how animals are feeling by the way that the blurry shapes move in front of me. It's really weird. It's definitely just kind of something you pick up after many, many years of doing blurry work, I guess.
Even without the mask on, just through your experience, you can sort of sense how animals are feeling and as whether they're aggressive or not.
Yeah, I've found that I can really tell how an animal is feeling by the way that its body moves underwater, even though I have really blurry vision just after so many years of doing this. If I see a shark's blurry movement being kind of twitchy and fast, I'll know that it's agitated and it's not a good time to be in the water. Or if a manta ray flips its fin fast, I know that it's had a little fright and it's not comfortable anymore. So yeah, it's just something I've built up over many years of doing this. It's kind of like an extrasensory perception in my blurry vision.
Which is incredible for the type of work that you're doing. If you're working with these animals all the time, then knowing how they're feeling can really affect how long you stay with them.
Absolutely. I know that I've had a lot of encounters that have lasted a lot longer than usual humans have had the chance to, because I'm really sinking into tapping into their energy and their frequency and, just being as calm and gentle and non-invasive as possible while having the calmness to approach them and be in their space in a way that most people would be kind of flipping around and creating too much commotion for them to be comfortable in.
Yeah. Outside of the animal sort of activism, the ocean activism, do you have a preference for shooting stills or video? Like, do you prefer one over the other?
Interesting question that I haven't been asked before. They're both very different to me. And as you know, having shot with me a lot, the way that I work with video compared to photos is an entirely different process. Like if you try to film me doing underwater photos, it's not a very graceful thing. It's kind of like moving from pose to pose and, moving the clothing and whatnot in between, and then having to like pose and find that perfect moment, as opposed to the video footage is a continuous flowing movement, really having to go with whatever happens. So it's more surrender. Can't make everything perfect.
Do you find that you tend to prepare differently for one or the other, or is it just as soon as you get in the water you make a decision?
I think I'm ready to go for either one at any given moment. It's just a different headset that I have to, head frame of mind that I have to put myself in that moment. Say, okay, now we're doing video, got it. And now I know how I'm going to move and, dance through the water column. I think I probably have to say that video for me is more exciting, because when you see it played back, it evokes more of a sense of being underwater. You see the movement and the trailing and all of these glorious fins moving and the hair moving, and that to me is like the most magical experience. Yeah, it's more difficult though as a performer.
Yeah, because you don't have those, you can't just reset. You have to continue the movement that you were doing. So I kind of threw this out to Facebook and stuff before we came on, just asking if anyone had questions to ask you. And one of them was, do you have a most favorite or most interesting place that you've been and shot at?
Oh, it's so hard to choose. There's so many awesome places for different reasons. I'm going to run through a few just of why I like them. Tonga, because you can swim legally with humpback whales. Oh my God,
Yeah.
so amazing. And they have those two gorgeous underwater caves there, Swallows Cave and Mariner's Cave, I think it's called, which are just like epic underwater natural cavern studios. Cenotes in Mexico, just gorgeous, stunning, amazing underwater natural pools, but cold and lots of mosquitoes and a bit challenging. Bahamas is probably the most pleasant place with so many awesome animals and things to swim with as well. Like, it's just a playground for mermaids. So that's why I'm so excited to work with you there. And it's warm, it's tropical and beautiful. Yeah, so that's probably like the most pleasant place to do it. Fiji is just lovely water. So that crazy tropical, lost in paradise kind of a thing. That's where I really learned to do underwater mermaid stuff. It was my first few trips being a mermaid was to Fiji.
Oh, wow. I've never been to Fiji, but I've seen some amazing shots from there.
I went, I think it was like around 2006 or something, and the fish and the coral was so beautiful. But as I've gone back over the years, it has degraded, which is really sad, and was one of the main reasons why I really went on this mission to try and help the ocean, because I literally saw it degrading in front of my eyes from the first time I became a mermaid in these tropical paradises to coming back and seeing it bleached coral and not many fish around.
Yeah, so seeing these things firsthand really drills it into you that something needs to be done, right?
Yeah, it's not just facts on a paper. It's like real life loss of these beautiful ecosystems.
One of the other things that people wanted to know was, what do you do to train? Like, how do you keep yourself fit and how do you keep your breath hold so good?
I do yoga and breath work and meditation every day. So that includes really breathing deeply into my lungs through all these different extreme postures to expand and strengthen my lungs. And I love dance so much. So whether I'm just jumping around my room or I'm out, dancing on stage, performing, that to me gives me that like bendability, stretchability, the spine staying active and, keeping that mermaid movement flow going all the time. So those are my things that just keep me fit and healthy. And I'm vegan, eat super healthy, no sugar whatsoever, don't smoke, hardly ever drink. So yeah, just super healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think that's a common thing in this industry anyway. I think with the breath holding has kind of got a pretty decent link to your cardio ability and your body fitness. I'm not the most fit person. I'm kind of a bit of a chubby guy, but I know that when my fitness is good, my breath hold is way better.
And you're just so chill. That's why you can hold your breath so long, Brett.
As long as I don't have to move anywhere, I can sit at the bottom for a long time. But if I have to start kicking these little legs of mine, it's all over. Well, thanks so much, Hannah. It's been amazing. Having a chat with you about this stuff has been really cool, and hopefully we'll have you back on again. But I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure talking to you, and good to hang out with my chill Aussie bro.
Yeah, totally. Australia represent. All right. Thanks, Hannah. We'll speak to you soon.
Bye for now.
Well, that's it. Another episode over way too soon. If you like the podcast, please subscribe. Or if you want to feel more involved, feel free to join the Facebook group listed in the show notes, where you can comment on the episodes and even suggest future guests. The Underwater Podcast is presented and produced by me, Brett Stanley, and our music is Neo by Oh Boy. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else these things appear. Keep creating, everyone. I'll see you in the water.